you want to open with some comments
Sure.
about today's signing, Dan? Then we'll just take some questions.
Sure. Even before talking about today's signing, I just want to say how much of a pleasure it's been already working with Coach Grizz, or Sean Griswold, our new human performance coach. Really like what he's doing with our team. I like the work capacity, I like the demand, and I really just like the approach. And so it's been a positive couple of weeks for us already, and with the staff that we've attracted to come with him. Also, it's been an amazing experience to work not only with Carla, our new athletic director, but with Jim Booz, who's over football specifically. And that relationship and the vision and the support and the intent for our program to have success here has been refreshing and energizing, and just, I think, is really been a positive step. So I've had a blast over the last month just working with the people we now have in place. Also, I've been really impressed with our team in their desire, their work ethic, the leadership, and just their intent. Clearly, our team is showing progress by confidence, by work ethic, but also by the standards they're holding one another to, which is really fun, where they really want this program to continue to get better. And much as it did from year 1 to year 2, they're certainly not satisfied and they want more. So having said that, regarding recruiting, as you know, a little bit different with this being the second signing day rather than the first, with very few spots left for most programs around the country. Jim was just telling me over 90% of what are considered elite or top players having signed, with about 70% of others, based on which source that you're interested in or look at, and that would be similar for us. So there isn't a ton of need or a ton of spots remaining, but there are selected spots, which sometimes, much like in NFL, maybe free agency, where a key player, a key position that you can add to already an existing piece or a program can be helpful. Again, what I want are amazing football players who are also exceptional students, who are also fantastic people. We want all of that. And for the most part, the young people we had on our visits have reflected just that. And so I think my staff is doing a really good job in terms of attracting and selecting the possible candidates. I think we're getting relationships built at a much higher level of trust in the Mid-Atlantic region than we certainly had 2 years ago. We've also maintained some footholds, and some pretty strong ones, where we came from, which I thought would just kind of go away, but they're kind of pursuing us a little bit in the fact that those networks and those calls and those referrals are coming with players that the coaches know who I am and what I'm looking for, what kind of program we run and I run, and which players they have that might fit. And so that's been fun to see the momentum generated in that regard. We did specifically target offensive and defensive linemen for this second part of our recruiting class. And the 3 players that I can talk about at this point, we have a graduate transfer, which is a very good player, in Marcus Applefield, sorry. And he is a really strong leader in the Rutgers program, a very good football player, very experienced, very mature, and just I was really impressed with who he is as a person. And so that adds immediate depth and quality of play at a position that we have an immediate need at. And I can't express the value of that. Again, my intention anytime I bring a graduate transfer, just so we're clear, is not a free agent. My intent with bringing a graduate transfer is they come help our program, but they also graduate with their master's degree. It's not one or the other, it is both. And that's the only way I endorse this whole idea of graduate transfers, is not only can they go play somewhere else, can they go and will they commit to finishing their postgraduate degree, and then it makes sense. And so Marcus is coming under those criteria, or that criteria. And then we have from the state of Hawaii, 2 players, Micah Maritarangi, and we also have Aaron Fa'amui, sorry. And both these guys, really interesting. In Micah, he was a receiver that grew into an offensive lineman, which means there's a lot of athleticism, a lot of mobility, but most importantly, he's tenacious, really plays the football the way that I like it to be played, where he's physical, he finishes, he chases defenders downfield, and there's a passion for the game, and he loves tough football. And the culture that we're working to build here on our offensive and defensive fronts is just that. And so we thought he was an exceptional fit, not only by the kind of player he is and who he's becoming and who he's become, but man, what an amazing young person as well. Really good person and another strong student. And in terms of Aaron, Aaron is also played offensive and defensive line, and dynamic is the way I would describe Aaron. Is explosive, is when you watch him playing the game, big play potential and fast and explosive, and plays with passion and effort. And it's not hard when you're watching the film. Oh, there he is. Oh, there he is. There he is. There's just this different, some people would call it motor or desire that he plays with. And when someone shows that playing both ways, that's pretty exceptional. Sometimes when a player plays both ways, there's kind of a pacing themselves kind of approach, and he's anything but that. And so we plan on playing him on the defensive line, which is an area of need for us as well. So an amazing student, a great kid, and I think a really good fit for UVA. We have 3 Samoan coaches on our staff, and we had recruited, again, at my previous job at Brigham Young, we had the 2nd most Polynesians in college football behind Hawaii. And so it's just been fun to see the interest the kids from that far away have had, not only in this program, but seeing this opportunity of, wow, ACC football and this type of education with the mentors on this staff with Polynesian heritage has been a stronger, has had a stronger impact than I had anticipated. And so I've been excited about that. Overall momentum, I would say progress and growth is just pretty much oozing out of our program. I can see it and feel it everywhere, and this is just kind of the next glimpse of what's happening. And so that's the way I'd summarize what happened today to this point. So any questions, if you have any?
Did you know where Marcus Applefield was today when he sent his letter in? Oh, this is a pretty good story.
So when I talked to Marcus, I can't give you all the specifics other than, so Marcus is interested in criminal justice and law enforcement, and he had just gotten back from doing some work with the police, and they were coming back from working on a child pornography case. So he stopped that just for a second to sign his letter of intent, and then he's back out doing his internship. And I don't know what the next case was or where he was off to, but pseudo SWAT team / offensive lineman for us, which is pretty cool.
His internship is with the New Jersey State Police.
Oh, I had experiences with them when I was in college.
I think that's why he's coming, is to keep an eye on you.
You had mentioned it in Mobile, the desire to go after an offensive line grad transfer if it fit, or maybe more than one, and also maybe quarterback. Can you size up how well you were able to do that? I mean, obviously you got the one, but were you involved with more? Did you want more?
Not necessarily. We were hopeful to have one high school player and one grad transfer offensive lineman. We were also considering, and possibly still might consider, a graduate transfer on the defensive line. Sometimes after spring practice or between now and sign. So sometimes where a player thinks they stand in their program, if their coaches aren't transparent, and then the existing players on their team look and say, okay, why did we just sign 5 more defensive tackles if I'm in the position I think I am? And so sometimes signing day even facilitates a different perspective of players having the program. Spring ball sometimes does that as well. So we might consider that as well, but that's to be determined. But our intention all along was one grad transfer on the offensive line, and Marcus was the player we wanted from the very beginning, with a lot of space between whoever would become our distant second. Marcus was our target.
Any more movement on the quarterback front, or is what you have what you'll go into the season with?
What we have is what we'll go into the season with. I'm really comfortable after seeing in the workouts to this point. Bryce Perkins is probably beyond what I had expected in terms of athleticism, leadership, and ability. This is all without throwing footballs, but just watching him. Brennan Armstrong has also had a very strong showing. So both of our mid-year transfers, I think, are right on point. And then Lyndall Stone, as well as I've been impressed actually with Matt Merrick in our workouts to this point. So I'm comfortable at this point going into the season with what we have, and then we'll just keep addressing it and building it from there on.
And then you mentioned being surprised at still the draw of the Hawaiian and Polynesian players to your program. How did you overcome the obvious geographic disadvantage there, the distance that they must come?
It's previous relationships with established trust. And relationships are one thing, but trusting relationships are something completely different. And what I've learned over time is trust mitigates distance, which has been a powerful lesson that coaches in my program that have had strong relationships with families for years and years and years, it really becomes, oh, he's there? Well, this is where I'm recommending my son go, because of all this time and history that has established trust beyond what anyone else can really establish in the amount of time recruiting has. And ultimately, families want a place for their son to be safe, to be nurtured, mentored, cared for, guided, mentored with someone that they really admire and want their son to be with. And in that particular case, that's what I've learned, is just those relationships that my coaches have with those families. It's not, it really isn't how far will they go, it's who will they be with. And that has been the difference.
Sort of piggybacking on that, a lot of West Coast schools obviously have a lot of Hawaiian, Samoan players, and as you did. How important is that to you at this stage of your program to keep that line going, and how good, or is there something different about these guys? They seem to be really good football players.
They're really good football players by culture, by intent, by preparation. And so this year, now with counting Chris on our current team already, and then Wayne coming off of his mission, there will be 5 Polynesian players in our program, which is, it's just the beginning. What I'm finding and what I'm seeing is, and I didn't know how that would work coming to Virginia. I didn't know if that, but it's a stronger draw because of the people than I had imagined. And when you consider especially the offensive and defensive fronts and the impact, put it this way, the opportunity and the area we in our program that needs to grow the most, and how that matches with the Polynesian culture and the possibility of options coming, that just seems to be a pretty natural fit so far. And who would have guessed? But I'm glad that it's working out for us. And so even though it doesn't make much sense geographically, it makes quite a bit of sense when you start looking at the yield. And so it doesn't mean that our focus now is shifting only to Hawaii. We'll still be passionate and even doing a better job very close to home as our priority. It just means now that we're not willing to say, okay, we won't look there because it's already kind of working.
You have mentioned how Bryce and Brennan fit more the mold of the quarterback you're looking for. Yet with Kurt this past season, and even some in 16, your offense had its moments.
Yeah.
But you guys did not score a point on your last 28 possessions on offense.
Yeah.
As you reflect and review, what have you determined were the causes, and what can you do aside from personnel to help correct it?
Well, I think I'll start in reverse order. It isn't only personnel. It has to be innovation and execution and schematics in addition to. That's where the program currently is. And the difference between year one, where we were working just to be consistent within a football game, one game. In year two, we've been working to be consistent throughout the course of a season. And so a fairly strong start and competitive play, I would say, with Navy and possibly Boston College being the outliers of the season, where it's just, okay, what happened with those two? But the rest it kind of could have been anyone's game. And so as you look now about the tail end, the last 2 games especially, I think going into the Virginia Tech game, we had expected a game that if we played the way that I believed we could, it might be a 14-13, 17-16, 10-7 kind of football game. And it was pretty close to what that would have been like. and Virginia Tech had something to do with that in the way they played. The Navy game I view as a completely different scenario, meaning that educating a team as to what postseason not only looks like, what it feels like, how to manage it, and how to prepare for that. That was not only new, but quite frankly, a little bit beyond and expanded beyond what I prepared our team for, and we played exactly as they were prepared. Not only as a team for that game, but as a program going into that setting. So in answer to your question, when you're reliant predominantly on the pass, it is easier to defend, not harder to defend. If the quarterback is not mobile, there's immediately more pressure put on offensive linemen to block, runners to run, receivers to catch. Everyone has to be better. As soon as the quarterback can move, can extend, can create, there's less pressure on, and the performance expectation is slightly lessened on every other player around. So we have to continue not only to bring in the right personnel, but also to innovate to deliver the current players we have at the very highest level, regardless of who we play and regardless of the circumstances. And who cares if it's cold or if it's windy? Who cares if it's snowing or if it's rainy? Who cares if it's ultimately, regardless of conditions and regardless of opponent, we need consistent football. And we showed glimpses. I'm not sure what the word you used, but there were moments, and significantly more than the year before, and significant progress, I think, would be the way I described it. But ultimately, we also know, and what was just exposed is how much more we have to do to truly be a contender for the championship in this league and to be strong in the postseason.
Obviously, a lot of the fan base were a little bit upset about the lack of offense in the Navy game. Were you totally satisfied with the play calling that you got in that game? And is that more of a product of what you just said, or would you like to have seen something a little different?
Man, I wasn't happy with really anything in the game, including my own play calling defensively, or if I were to say, could I target anything in that game I really liked Quinn Blanding in that game. If you were to watch it from the football film perspective, wow, he played really well. And Eli, handback. So I like those two players on that game, not only in terms of intent, but yield and performance. Other than that, the team played in a manner, offensively and defensively and special teams, and I pride myself on preparing our teams well and preparing them consistently and giving us the best chance to win. But in relation to seeing the outcome and watching it play out, my formula for that game, as well as our players' formula, there are two parts to it, and maintaining the edge necessary to not only just be at the game and to enjoy the hospitality room and the different events and all that. Luxury, the research has said, is kind of a performance narcotic. And unless you're really mature and gone through it before, you have to be very skilled at flipping the switch from here's practice, now here's recreation, now right back to practice and recreation. And over time, we became, and heard frequently in terms of managing the external environment, it feels good to be praised. And there were so many people excited for Virginia to be back in the postseason. And it doesn't take much. And I love that about our fan base and how excited they were. For my team, I wasn't capable in getting the message through to them of, okay, there's the praise, but getting there is only one thing. It's a lot more fun when you play well once you're there. And so I made a comment yesterday that the outcome of that game, I'm not saying that it was desirable, but in a matter-of-fact way, pretty necessary for exactly where we are to show if you're not truly prepared and ready for a game like that on that stage, then that could easily happen. And that's given us a fantastic point of reference to start the offseason from, to show that, yeah, we've made great progress, but here's now some deficits that still need to be addressed.
You had also mentioned to me the idea that because you won more games, because you were in a bowl game, that was responded to on the recruiting trail. How did that show up? And you said in the initial early signing that you were a little disappointed or wanted to focus on in-state. And was that anything in this class this part of the class that you tried to adjust?
Not so much in the second part of the class by really availability of prospects that we wanted remaining. And interestingly enough, and this is kind of culturally, and there's also some unique social studies that have been done on this, but really almost everywhere he went, and I spoke at the AFCA convention this year, almost every place we went, especially out of the state of Virginia, was holy cow, you guys did an amazing job, and there's fantastic progress going, and look at how your program is taking off. In-state, a little more reserved as to that's good progress, but kind of wanting to see more. And I think that happens sometimes where the appreciation for what's happening sometimes is greater the farther you are away from that. It becomes a little bit more objective. Sometimes close, even when you're in your own families. Significant things to someone on the outside. When you know the people, it's maybe not quite as significant. And so time will certainly work in our favor as we intend to continue to improve, continue to grow, continue to get better, and I think the results will show that.
I think some of your coaches mentioned this to me because you're going to sign so few people in this period. A lot of what was happening in January in state was for the 19 class.
The majority of the second part of this recruiting class was 19, and for the first time, other than right at the beginning when I was hired, I had a chance to just meet a lot of our in-state coaches, which, man, was that fun. It's one thing to hear about the program and see them on film. It's another thing to actually walk the halls and be with their coaches. And so relationships were fostered, and so many of them have said they'd love to come to watch our spring practices and see what we're really doing. And that was a great launch point, really, for the impetus still of what we want. And man, there's so many good players in this state, and so many of them are prepared well academically. And so we'll just continue to work on the relationships and the yield of our own state, and I'm confident that will happen. But the 19 class, while my coaches are working on that, I was really in the high schools of our in-state coaches and getting to know them.
Speaking of the 2019 class, what sort of lessons, now that you've gone through the whole new arrangement with the early and normal signing periods, what sort of lessons have you learned, and what will you do differently with the class of 2019 per se, maybe than you did as you set up to go into 2018?
Yeah, I think the main lessons learned are the obvious one. It's everything's earlier. So meaning that this after the first signing date, what really happened was spring recruiting. Spring recruiting is basically over. I don't know what we're gonna call spring recruiting now, but that's now not spring. We just did spring, and so now that is something else. You guys can come up with a crafty name for that, but really what we just did was spring. So everything is accelerated by one more cycle, which I don't think is positive for the decision making of the student athlete. What I would love to have is it to be slowed down, where there's no contact that can be made, period, with any recruit until at least the beginning of their junior year. No offers could be extended verbally, hinted, winked, emailed, texted, pulling the thing behind in the air. Just, I would love it to be later, and I think that would facilitate a lesser involvement of third parties, of youth coaches of 7-on-7, and most of these guys' motives are pure. They want to help their student athletes, but it's just going too fast, in my opinion, for the betterment of these kids and their development and their choices. And so what I just shared is, what I learned is it's moving faster still. And as a coach, you have a choice. You either play by those rules, or you try to play a different game, or you try to play by a different set of rules to distinguish yourself. But currently, earlier is winning the day, meaning whoever gets to know the kids earliest, build the relationships the deepest, has the best chance. And it's unfortunate that that's having to start earlier and earlier and earlier, and I'd love for parameters to be set to let the kids be kids, let junior high kids be junior high kids, let ninth graders be ninth graders, let sophomores worry about getting their driver's license, and then maybe after that the recruiting starts. And that's, it might be philosophically opposed to whatever others are thinking. I think it's too early. But that is the direction it's going, and we have to choose either to perform or compete in that environment, or somehow mitigate it differently. And that wouldn't be something I'd share anyway, because then everyone would know what we're doing.
You said in December that one of the unintended consequences of the early period was the conflict between bowl preparation and recruiting.
Yeah.
You've since been to the coaches' convention. As you spoke to your colleagues, did you sense the same frustration? And if so, did you sense any chance of resolution?
I expected to hear more pushback on how difficult it was to prepare for bowl games and have that that signing period. And while it was uncomfortable, there wasn't an uproar of this has to change. So it surprised me a little bit. I think a lot of us that were close to the signing date in our bowl game felt it a little bit more, but what was also clear, back to the question before, is the kids that were signing early, it was refreshing because very few of them had drama. They knew where they were going. It wasn't requiring the same amount of attention that the second period takes, and so I think that probably went off more as what we all would have liked it to be like. It just happened. It just forced everyone, while playoff games were going in high school, while bowl season was going on, it kind of didn't allow for all the theatrics, which, man, I have mixed feelings about that. I would rather not have it happen while bowl season was on, but if I had to trade that for the theatrics, I would take it, I think.
Jerry?
Still being a student of the game as you are, and loving to defend Wishbone,
Yeah.
et cetera. As far as your own personal education against the option, was that a valuable experience?
Man. It was very similar to the very first game when I was the defensive coordinator at New Mexico, when it was just a barrage of points and different things that happened. And then that led to this passion and this study and our option defense success. Since then, that experience versus Navy, while there are elements of option, it's a much different type and approach. And so I'm anxious now, as fast as possible, to get restarted on what that'll look like. And it'll promote growth, not only me personally, but in our program. It's always fun to make progress. Ultimately, though, sometimes how you make progress is some of those awful stumbles along the way that hurt the most, that then provide or expose weaknesses that you have to get fixed on behalf of your program and your kids, and to help them have their best opportunity. And so, yeah, I'm anxious to now research and study and learn and do even more on that version. And Army's running a similar version, and it's funny because one of my mentors, Rocky Long, and they play great defense every year at San Diego State. They had a similar experience happen to them in the bowl game by Army. And so we've already been on the phone saying, okay, when are we getting together? Because we got to crack the code here. So it's kind of, I can laugh about it now just because I know growth will happen and will be better. But it surprised me.
I might have missed or forgotten, but Tim Harris, is there an update? Is he good to go for?
Tim's good to go. He's with our team currently. He'll be practicing and playing this spring and this fall. Malcolm Cook is also good to go. He's back and ready. So the majority of our defense is back, and our depth is back. We also already know kind of the elephant in the room. There goes Quinn, Micah, and Andrew. Andrew's story was phenomenal in terms of his development over a 2-year period and who he became. And man, I had a blast watching him at the Senior Bowl. I was watching him just thinking, is this the same guy, that was here 2 years ago? And that was really fun. And then Quinn and Micah he played so hard so long for us. He was still a little bit beat up and had to leave a day early, or one day into the Senior Bowl. But Quinn just controlling everything and making a million plays and getting everyone lined up. So we'll lose all of them, but I'm really optimistic. And my expectation is for our team certainly to be better, but our defense also to be better, even though we're losing those players.
We look at things very simply of, you went from X number of wins to X number of wins in a bowl game. Do you have to win more games next year for people to view this as progress?
I'm not sure. I think that's the easiest way for anyone to say, yeah, progress is happening, and I'm not sure how many expected that big a jump from year 1 to year 2. It's hard to say. I just try to control what I can control. And the teams we play are always different, how they're situated and how injuries occur. And the easiest way to measure is, did we get better or not by number of wins, by bowl appearances, by bowl victories. As a coach, if that's all you look at, wow, there's a lot of cool stuff and a lot of improvement you can miss along the way. So it'll be a combination of both, which it always is for me.
We'll go over here for the last 2 questions.
You obviously you not just lose those 3 guys, but there's been several defections on the defensive line. You mentioned elephant in the room just on those guys leaving, but it seems also too like you got to figure out what to do on that front.
Yes.
What's your sort of vague view of it now as you get ready for spring ball?
I'll give a specific view. Actually, at the beginning of the season, Jack Powers' wrist injury never really healed appropriately, so that was one player that was lost early on. Then Christian Brooks ended up being declared medically not able to play through a number of concussions, so that was the second scholarship player at the defensive line. We had 2 players with conduct issues that ended up leaving the program, and we're both scholarship players, so that was 4. Christian Baumgardner also had a violation of team policy and left the program, so that was 5. And John Curvin is at risk simply because of a concussion protocol that he hasn't cleared yet. And so that would be up to 6 players on scholarship at one position. And so that is already forcing us to look at, knowing we were targeting offensive and defensive linemen already. Now we'll be looking at possible position changes maybe within our offensive front and defensive front, as well as the incoming players, as to how to staff both units, both fronts the best way possible. So I've never experienced that amount of attrition at one spot before, and a pretty unique set of circumstances, and I don't think any of them are related. They're all these different things that have happened. However, it does form now, I'd love to say, okay, now our defensive line will look like year 3 of our program. Our defensive line will really look like year 1. Now, and so different positions are at different phases in our program, which is leading to some of the depth issues and inconsistencies that happen through the course of the year in a couple of cases. So my job now is to look at where those deficiencies are and try to get as many position groups up to a standard level and have equality to where it allows the consistency as quickly as I can, and that's made it just more difficult.
With the Ernie Richard movement to defensive end, was that something predicated because of the issues on the line, or was it more about you thought he would actually fit better there?
It was both almost at the exact same time of here's a physical player that can probably add more value to our team than what he's currently doing, and then here goes the issue we had with Stephen Wright and Juwan Moy, who were both in the 2 deep and in the top 5 players at that, and so it's a pretty fast patch-up. And then to have your first experience against Navy and option football, that was his head was spinning a little bit. And but I like him. I think he's capable, and I think he can help us. And I'm really anxious to now having an off season and a spring and a summer and a fall camp to give him his best chance to help us there.
Do you each season change not position responsibilities, but staff responsibilities, say during the week or on game day? And if so, what changes might you contemplate for next season?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that so my passion is learning and my passion is growth of organizations and young people. I love the development process. And one of the very first principles in the book, Good to Great, is you get the right people on the bus, the wrong ones off the bus. But what takes the most work is getting the right people in the right seats. And those seats can change based on where you're going, how fast you want to get there, and what that road looks like. And someone might be very skilled at, for instance, my son is just getting his driver's license, my second son, and I'd probably feel comfortable riding with him if it's straight and the highway and maybe out in the desert and there's not many cars and he's good to drive then. I probably wouldn't have him in the seat if we're going to New York City on his learner's permit, because there's just a lot of stuff happening. And so certainly as I evaluate each capability of my staff, now that I've known them in this setting for 2 seasons, there's always subtle shifts that are maybe not as transparent to the outside world. Some might be, but internally there's always that's happening. And I'm always trying to put, not only in the player perspective, but the right people in the right seats to help the collective and the individual move forward. And that's basically what happens. My coaches have some time off right now this week, and then Monday, that is the process that starts every year. And so that leads us up into spring practice, and when spring practice starts, it's with a lot of those initiatives in play, and then I assess it through spring to see if that looks like it might be beneficial to us.